They told us the war was over. They told us the Mongols were gone, and the island of Tsushima was safe. They were wrong. The most dangerous thing to ever set foot on this island didn't come from across the sea. It fell from the stars. And on this night, the ghost of Tsushima met a god and tried to kill him. It began not with a sound, but with a silence. The crickets stopped. The wind died. The birds that usually slept in the canopy of the Golden Forest woke up and screamed all at once. Then came the fire. It wasn't the orange glow of a torch or the red anger of a bonfire. It was a streak of blinding, sickly emerald green that tore the night sky in half. It slammed into the earth with a force that shook the dust from the rafters of houses 10 miles away. It was not a ship. It was not a meteor. It was an omen. Jin Sakai stood on the ridge overlooking the Golden Forest. His horse, Nobu, stamped his hooves nervously, his ears pinned back against his skull. Animals knew when the natural order had been broken, and tonight, the order was shattered. Jin placed a calming hand on the horse's neck, feeling the animal's trembling muscles. "Easy," he whispered, though his own heart was beating a rhythm against his ribs that he hadn't felt since Komoda Beach. He dismounted, leaving the horse tied to a cedar tree far from the impact site. Whatever was down there, he would face it alone. The air grew hotter as he descended into the woods. The familiar scent of damp earth and pine needles was gone, replaced by a pungent, metallic acridity, like the smell of a blacksmith's forge, but sharper, chemical, stinging the back of his throat. It smelled like lightning that had been bottled and left to rot. As he crept through the tall grass, the devastation revealed itself. Ancient ginkgo trees, which had stood since his grandfather's time, were snapped like dry twigs. Their golden leaves were not burning with fire, but with a strange, blue, crackling energy that refused to go out. The ground was scarred, a long trench dug into the mud leading to a massive crater, and in the center of the crater lay the beast. It was a vessel, but unlike any ship Jin had ever seen. It had no sails, no oars, no wood. It was a wedge of silver and scorched gray metal, sleek and predatory, shaped like an arrowhead. Smoke poured from its side. It hummed, a low, vibrating thrum that Jin felt in his teeth rather than heard with his ears. Jin crouched low, blending into the shadows. He was the ghost. He was the observer. A hatch on the side of the metal arrowhead hissed open. Steam vented into the night air. A figure emerged. It was a man. Or at least, it walked like a man. He wore heavy boots and robes of a textured woven fabric in shades of earth and sand, layered over a dark tunic. A heavy cloak hung from his shoulders, singed and torn. He stumbled as he hit the mud, coughing. He didn't look like a Mongol warlord. He looked weary, like a monk who had walked 1,000 miles. But monks did not fall from the sky in metal arrows. Jin watched as the stranger pulled a device from his belt. It wasn't a weapon Jin recognized. It looked like a small metal box. The stranger scanned the ship with it, shaking his head. He spoke then, a language that sounded harsh and rolling, completely alien to Jin's ears. Hyperdrive stabilizer, gone. Nav computer, fried. The stranger sighed, rubbing his temples. He turned, and for a moment, the moonlight caught his face. He looked human. He had eyes, a nose, a mouth. But there was something about him, a presence. The air around him seemed to ripple, as if the heat of the crash was clinging to his skin. Jin shifted his weight, a twig snapping under his boot. A rookie mistake. The stranger didn't spin around. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply stopped moving. He tilted his head, as if listening to a whisper that Jin couldn't hear. "You are loud," the stranger said. Jin froze. The man was speaking Japanese, but the accent was wrong. It was mechanical, the syllables flat, as if he were reading them from a book he had never opened. "Your fear," the stranger continued, still with his back turned. "It echoes in the force. Come out." Jin realized then that stealth was no longer an option. He rose from the grass, 50 yards away, his hand resting on the hilt of his Sakai katana. He kept his face hidden behind the terrifying mask of the ghost, the snarl of a demon meant to frighten men. "You speak our tongue," Jin shouted, his voice gravelly and threatening. "But you are not of this world." The stranger turned slowly. He raised his empty hands. "I am a traveler. My vessel was damaged. I crashed. I mean no harm to you or your village." "You destroyed the sacred forest," Jin accused, stepping closer, his boots squelching in the mud. "You bring fire and poison air. Identify yourself." "I am Kalen," the stranger said. "I am a knight of the Republic, a keeper of the peace." "Peace," Jin scoffed. He drew his longbow in one fluid motion, knocking a heavy, armor-piercing arrow. He aimed it directly at Kalen's chest. "I have heard men speak of peace while standing on the ashes of my home. Drop the cylinder at your belt." Kalen looked down at the silver tube hanging at his hip. He placed a protective hand over it. "This is my life. I cannot surrender it." "Then you will lose it." Jin released the string. The arrow flew true. Jin was a master archer. At this distance, he could hit a coin. The arrow screamed through the air, destined for the stranger's shoulder. A warning shot to incapacitate, not to kill. But it never hit. Kalen did not dodge. He did not raise a shield. He simply lifted his right hand, palm open, and made a small pushing motion against the air. The arrow stopped. Jin stared, his breath catching in his throat. The arrow hung suspended in midair, vibrating as if caught in a spiderweb of solid wind. With a flick of Kalen's wrist, an arrow was tossed aside, clattering uselessly against the metal hull of the ship. "Sorcery," Jin whispered. The fear was cold water down his spine. This was not a man. This was a demon. "I warned you," Kalen said, his voice hardening. "I am a guardian, but I will defend myself." Jin dropped the bow. It was useless against a spirit. He reached for his katana. "If you are a demon, then steel is the only language you will understand." The blade hissed as it left the scabbard, shining under the moonlight. Jin settled into a stance, wide, grounded, ready to spring. The stone stance. Kalen sighed, a look of genuine regret crossing his face. "I do not wish to hurt you, warrior. Go home." "My home is behind me," Jin growled. "I am the only thing standing between you and them." Kalen reached for the cylinder. Snap hiss. The sound was a violent hum, like 1,000 angry hornets. A beam of pure, concentrated plasma erupted from the metal hilt. It was the color of envy, a vibrant, toxic green that illuminated the forest with a sickly glow. The rain that touched the beam hissed and evaporated instantly, creating a fog of steam around the Jedi. Jin hesitated. A sword of light, a sword of fire. "Walk away," Kalen commanded, holding the weapon in a two-handed grip, the tip pointed at Jin's throat. Jin Sakai did not walk away. He screamed a war cry, a sound meant to banish his own fear, and charged. He closed the gap in a heartbeat. He feinted high, then struck low, aiming for the legs. It was a technique that had felled Mongol generals. Kalen moved with a grace that was unnatural. He didn't just block, he flowed. He brought the green blade down to parry Jin's strike. Crunch. There was no ringing of steel. There was a terrible grinding sound. Jin felt the impact vibrate up his arms, but it felt wrong. Soft. Hot. He pulled back instantly, stumbling in the mud. He looked at his katana. The blade, forged by the greatest smiths of Japan, folded 1,000 times, now had a deep, glowing notch melted into the edge. "It burns," Jin realized, panic rising in his chest. "It doesn't just cut, it consumes. If I block that sword, it will slice through my blade and take my head." The rules of combat had just changed. For the first time in his life, Jin could not parry. To parry was to die. "You are fast," Kalen noted, circling him. The hum of the lightsaber rose and fell as he moved it. Vroom, vroom. "But you are fighting a war you cannot understand." "I understand death," Jin gasped, circling opposite him. "It looks the same in every language." Jin shifted his grip. He held the sword loose, the water stance, fluid, evasive. He had to be water. He had to flow around the fire. He attacked again, a flurry of rapid strikes. Slash, dodge, thrust, spin. Kalen blocked them all. He was calm, almost bored. He swatted Jin's attacks away with frustrating ease, his movements precise and economical. He was testing the samurai, analyzing him. "You rely on anger," Kalen said calmly, deflecting a killing blow. "It makes you sloppy." "It makes me focused," Jin roared. He tried to close the distance, to get inside the reach of that long beam of light. Kalen extended his hand again. Jin felt it before he saw it. A wall of pressure, invisible and solid, slammed into his chest. It lifted him off his feet. He flew backward through the air, crashing through a thicket of bamboo. He hit the wet earth hard, rolling, gasping for air. His ribs screamed in protest. The force, the weapon of the invisible hand. Jin scrambled to his feet, mud covering his armor, blood trickling from his lip beneath the mask. He hid behind a large rock, breathing heavily. "He can stop arrows. He can cut steel with light. He can throw me with his mind." Jin closed his eyes for a second. He thought of his uncle, Lord Shimura. His uncle would march out and demand an honorable duel. His uncle would die in 10 seconds against this man. Honor is a shackle, Jin thought. I cannot be a samurai tonight. I must be the ghost. "You cannot hide," Kalen's voice echoed through the trees. "I can sense your life. I can feel your heartbeat." Jin looked at his pouches. Black powder, sticky bombs, kunai, dirt. "He senses life," Jin whispered. "Then let him sense chaos." Jin sheathed his sword. He didn't run, he climbed. He scrambled up the rough bark of a cedar tree, perching on a high branch, blending into the darkness of the canopy. Kalen walked into the clearing, the green lightsaber casting long, dancing shadows. He scanned the ground. "Come down, let us talk." Jin answered with smoke. He threw a smoke bomb directly at Kalen's feet. Poof! A cloud of thick, acrid gray smoke exploded, engulfing the Jedi. Kalen coughed, waving his hand to clear the air, but the smoke was thick with chemical irritants. "Tricks," Kalen muttered. He closed his eyes, reaching out with the force, trying to locate the warrior in the trees. But Jin was already moving. He jumped from the branch, not at Kalen, but behind him. He landed silently in the mud. Kalen spun around, sensing the disturbance. He swung the lightsaber in a wide, decapitating arc. Jin ducked under the beam. He could feel the heat singe the hairs on the back of his neck. As he rolled under the swing, he reached out and slapped a sticky bomb onto the back of Kalen's thigh. Jin rolled away into the brush. Boom! The explosion tore through the silence. It wasn't enough to kill a man in armor, but the concussion was devastating. Kalen screamed, his leg buckling. The blast threw him forward, breaking his concentration. The connection to the force shattered for a brief, critical second. Jin didn't hesitate. He sprinted from the shadows. He threw a kunai. It struck Kalen's shoulder, burying deep. The Jedi gasped, dropping to one knee, the lightsaber dipping into the mud, sending up geysers of steam. Jin was on him. He didn't use his sword yet. He kicked Kalen in the chest, knocking him onto his back. He stomped on the hand holding the lightsaber. Kalen grunted, gripping the hilt tight, refusing to let go. Kalen looked up, his eyes flashing with sudden anger. He raised his free hand. Jin was lifted into the air again, choking. An invisible grip crushed his throat. Kalen stood up, limping, lifting Jin higher and higher with the power of his mind. "You are annoying," Kalen hissed, the pain making his control waver. Jin kicked his legs, gasping. He couldn't breathe. He reached into his belt, his fingers finding a small pouch. He didn't throw it at Kalen. He threw it at the ground between them. Flash powder. A blinding burst of white magnesium light exploded. It blinded Kalen. The Jedi cried out, covering his eyes. The invisible grip vanished. Jin fell to the ground, coughing, massaging his throat. Both men were hurt. Both were tired. The rain poured down harder, turning the crater into a swamp. They stood 10 paces apart. Kalen blinked, tears streaming from his eyes as he tried to clear his vision. "You fight without honor," he accused, his voice shaking. "You use dirt and shadows." Jin stood up, wiping the mud from his mask. He drew his katana again. The blade was notched and ugly, but it was still sharp. "Honor died on the beach," Jin said, his voice cold and flat. "I do not fight for a code. I fight for my home, and you are trespassing." Kalen roared. He was done playing. He raised the lightsaber high above his head. He gathered the force into his legs. He leaped. It was a jump no human could make. 20 feet into the air, soaring like a hawk. He came down like a meteor, the green blade ready to split Jin Sakai in two. Jin watched him fall. Time seemed to slow down. He saw the rain droplets suspended in the air. He saw the glowing plasma. He saw the opening. He expects me to dodge away, Jin thought. He expects fear. Jin did not dodge away. He stepped forward. As Kalen landed, bringing the blade down, Jin slid to the right, moving inside the arc of the weapon. The lightsaber missed Jin by an inch, slamming into the mud and melting a hole in the earth. Jin was close now, chest to chest. Kalen's eyes went wide. He tried to pull the saber back, but it was stuck in the molten glass of the soil for a fraction of a second. Jin didn't stab the man. He knew that if he tried to kill the Jedi, the man might still use his magic to stop the heart in Jin's chest. Jin attacked the source of the power. With a guttural scream, Jin brought the pommel of his heavy katana down, smashing it into the emitter of the lightsaber, right where the crystal focused the energy. Crack! The sound was like a gunshot. Sparks showered them both. The delicate internal components of the weapon, built for precision, shattered under the brutal force of the samurai steel. The green beam flickered, it sputtered, and then, with a dying whine, it vanished. Silence returned to the forest. Kalen stood there, holding a useless, smoking metal tube. He looked at it in horror. He pressed the button. Nothing. He looked up. The tip of Jin Sakai's katana was resting against his throat. Jin was breathing hard, his chest heaving. His armor was scorched, his cloak torn. But his hand was steady. Kalen froze. He could feel the cold steel against his skin. He closed his eyes, waiting for the final stroke. He had lost. The primitive warrior had beaten him. "Do it," Kalen whispered. "I am defeated." Jin stared at him. The rain washed the blood from the blade. He looked at the stranger's face, a face of fear, of exhaustion. This wasn't a monster. This was a man who had fallen from the sky and was terrified. Jin thought of the Mongols. They killed for pleasure. They killed for conquest. This man, he had only fought to survive. The ghost slowly lowered his sword. Kalen opened his eyes, confused. "Why?" Jin stepped back, giving the man space. He sheathed his katana with a sharp click that echoed in the clearing. "You are not my enemy," Jin said softly. "You are just lost." Jin pointed to the smoking ship. "Repair your vessel." Kalen clutched his injured leg, looking at the samurai with a mixture of awe and confusion. You are sparing me?" Jin turned his back on the Jedi. He began to walk away, his silhouette fading into the rainy darkness of the forest. He stopped at the edge of the crater and looked back one last time. The lightning flashed, illuminating the white demon mask. "Man has enough graves," Jin said, his voice carrying over the storm. "Fix the ship. Leave. If you return..." Jin paused, his hand hovering near his waist. "Next time, I won't aim for the weapon." Kalen watched him go. He sat down in the mud, clutching the broken pieces of his lightsaber. He looked at the sky, then at the dark forest where the ghost had vanished. He realized then that there were things in this universe that the Jedi archives had never prepared him for. There were warriors who didn't need the Force to be terrifying. Kalen began to work on his ship. He would leave this planet before sunrise, and he would never, ever come back to Tsushima.